everyone. Thank you for that warm welcome. And I've already learned so much today from our discussion. So a warm welcome from Scotland. I'm going to run my own PowerPoint, so please let me know if it's not working correctly, but I'll put that on now. So hopefully that should come up on your screen now. Is that showing correctly? It is, I can see that. Fantastic. Well, I want to talk a little bit today around how children's participation works within the context of national human rights institutions like my own. I have the best job in the world as the Children and Young People's Commissioner of Scotland. It's my role to promote and safeguard the rights of all of the children across Scotland, everyone up to the age of 18 or up to the age of 21 for those that have got care experience. There are some photos on the screen that some of you may not be able to see, but representing a little bit about the approach to my work. So the photo at the top is me in a primary school talking to some children and young people about our work. The next photo down is me speaking in the Parliament. And the third photo is me with a couple of my young advisors at the United Nations, representing the point that children's participation flows through every aspect of our work. Like other national human rights institutions, we're created by an Act of Parliament, an Act of the Scottish Parliament, ensuring our independence, but also giving us functions to promote and safeguard rights. And of particular interest to this group is the fact that within our legislation, there's a legal requirement to involve children and young people in our work. And we interpret that to mean every aspect of our work. And so our work is the same as other national human rights institutions, raising awareness of rights, considering law, policy, and practice, communicating best practice, but it also involves involving children and young people in our work. This picture on the screen now is a copy of the warrant that I have from the Queen. I'm appointed by the Queen of the United Kingdom. And I put that there because I think it's really important to recognize the legal authority the office has. But very importantly, when I talk to children and young people, I say that it's not actually the authority from the Queen that matters. It's the authority that I get from you. Children and young people don't have the same political rights, political power or economic power as adults, but they have the right to be involved in decisions which affect them. And that means everything. And so a big part of the job of Children's Commissioner is working directly with children and young people. And so when I became Children and Young People's Commissioner in 2017, I've now put a cartoon up on the screen, which sets out that when I started in 2017, I traveled all around the country and I asked children and young people not just about what issues were important to them, but also how they wanted me to act as their commissioner. And some of the things that they told me is that they wanted the commissioner to be their champion, but someone who could work closely with them, that could come to their community, to make their spaces, to raise their voices, but also to use that power to speak truth to power. So that combination of being very compassionate and engaging with children and young people, coming to their communities, working directly with them, as some of the other speakers have said, that real importance about creating the spaces, going to the spaces, working in creative ways, but then raising their voices up in places of power. And at the bottom of the cartoon is a representation of one of my groups of young advisors. And so over the last 5 years, I've had a series of groups of young advisors, young human rights defenders who help me with every aspect of my work, including things like budget setting, governance of the organization, recruitment of staff, and anytime I'm doing any speeches or evidence to Parliament, I'll usually have young people with me. Because it's still quite early in the morning, I haven't brought one of my young advisors with me, but I usually would in this type of event. But it is a school day and it's early in the morning, so it wasn't quite working out. Children and young people told us a lot about the characteristics they wanted from NHRIs and children's commissioners. They talked about people who had the legal expertise and the power and the technical ability to promote their rights, but also some of the characteristics of being able to be engaging with them. And so I've set out on this slide, which we'll make available, some of the points that they made there. This led to us conceptualizing our mission as being a fierce champion of children's rights, and to making sure that laws are fair, to demand change on behalf of children and young people, to support human rights defenders. And this is a really important growing recognition of child human rights defenders, but also making sure that adults learn about children's rights and putting children's rights at the heart of it. And the photo on this slide is me at the Scottish Parliament giving evidence alongside some of my young advisors. And what you'll see there is that the balance in the room is primarily young people. So there are more young people in that room than there are adults. And I think that's a really important element as well in terms of creating that space. Young people helped us develop our values of bravery, respect, participation, independence, and leadership. And so their voice flows strongly through all of our work. As I mentioned earlier, we have young advisors. I now have 3 separate groups of young advisors. In the last few years, I've always had a single group, but I now have 3 separate groups. And so there's about 45 young people that I work with. One core group is the governance group. So they're involved in budget setting, recruitment, all aspects of the work generally. I have a specific group set up to look at mental health. This was primarily in response to some of the issues from COVID. And they're actually using my investigation powers. I've delegated to them the use of my investigation powers. And so for the first time, young people will actually be using the legal authority to undertake an investigation, including compelling evidence and taking evidence under oath. And they're doing that with the support of staff, but they're doing that entirely themselves with supportive staff. And so this is an interesting model as well. And then I have a third group, which is the European Network of Young Advisors. There are 43 independent children's rights institutions across Europe. And we each have young advisors who work together. At the moment, they're focusing on the issue of climate change. The space in our office is really important. And I'm going to show you a couple of extracts from this video, if it works, which shows the fact that we had children and young people help design our space. Welcome to the office of the Children and Young People's Commissioner Scotland. Come on in. So, the office was designed by children and young people, and we tried to implement all of the things that they asked us to do. We couldn't do all of them. For example, but you'll see here some of our, one of the other really key aspects that children and young people talk, space was intentionally left very the different parts of the office, which was designed by children and young people to be a very kind of multifunctional space. There's a lot of art, there's a lot of the use of technology, but also really importantly, these spaces that we have that allow children and young people to be involved in our work. As you'll see, a lot of bright colors, a lot of engaging spaces, and lots of multi-use spaces. This is the office that I work in, and one of the important elements is that when children and young people are in the office, they are allowed free use of my office. You'll see on the wall there the warrant from the Queen, which is tucked away slightly into a corner, but represents the authority of the office. But the larger wall on the opposite side of the room is a big glass wall where children and young people who come in can put their own voices and their own messages. And I think this really important message that we send to children and young people, that the space is theirs. Oh, and I can hear a young person at the moment, which is lovely. Here are some photos of some of the work, mostly pre-COVID, but some within COVID, representing the type of work that we do. On the top left of your screen is some work we did during COP26, the big climate change summit, with some members of the Children's Parliament. So that was an online event, but we hosted our side of it from the office. Next to that, me working with some families with children, with disabled children who had very difficult time during COVID. And so again, working with them outside, we just published a book together, doing some school visits, which were possible during COVID. You'll see me outside doing some work with an outdoor nursery. And this is really important as well, the engagement directly with very young children, including non-verbal children, to get their views. And I'll be doing more of that today. After this session, I'll be going straight to a nursery to talk to some of the children there about their experiences during COVID. You'll see a photo of me there with a ukulele as well. This was some young people who wrote a human rights song that I was helping them sing. Again, you have to be able to laugh at yourself as a children's commissioner. You have to be able to acknowledge your own limitations. I can't sing very well or dance, but I spend a lot of time singing and dancing with children and young people, mainly because it's fun, but secondly, because it shows them that you're able to work with them in a way that's meaningful to them as well. We have, prior to COVID, had each year a big human rights gathering where we brought children and young people from across Scotland together for residential sessions. Those were really important to bring children and young people into the same space. Those involved sometimes up to 200 children and young people over a period of 2 or 3 days. That's changed a bit because COVID, obviously now 2 years ago, we entered into a very different way of working. And the grave physical, emotional, and psychological impacts of COVID that the Committee on the Rights of the Child warned against really have come to pass. And so very much of our work over the last 2 years has been focused on how to engage with children and young people in the context of COVID, recognizing that children are disproportionately affected by the protections put in place around the pandemic, and that those whose rights were already most at risk have been disproportionately affected: disabled children, young carers, care experienced children and young people, other marginalized groups of children and young people. So we moved a lot of our work online. So as we are today, we started to move to focus on using platforms like Zoom and making sure that those were safe for children and young people. I would say that that was much easier with older children. There was a lot of learning in terms of trying to support older children engage with education online, and they were able to do that reasonably quickly in Scotland. We were able to get technology to most children and young people, and internet, but it proved really challenging for younger children and children who had complex communication needs that we weren't able to use the technology effectively to address. I'm going to skip ahead on some of these slides because we'll make them available, but I know time is quite short. But this was a summary of the work. This was a summary of some of the work that's that we've been doing, but I'll move past that to talk a little bit about the concept of child human rights defenders. And this was really important in terms of the young advisors for my office actually developed their own report to Parliament. And again, I delegated the power of my office to lay this report before Parliament. And the group of human rights defenders that we worked with captured a number of stories and a number of key themes that turned into recommendations laid before our Parliament around child human rights defenders. And so I really commend that report to you as well, but I use it as an example of where we actually give our power to children and young people to have their own voices heard and make recommendations directly to Parliament. And this report was really powerful because it was about children acting as human rights defenders. There's also a strong international element of our participation with children and young people. And again, I think that the important presentations that we've heard earlier about the regional and international level and how you involve children and young people in developing some of those regional frameworks and international frameworks is hugely important. Those same points about creating the space and building up the ability for children and young people to engage. But some of the examples I'll touch upon before I finish. The European Network of Ombudspersons for Children, which is 43 NHRIs for children across Europe. We all have young advisors that work together. We've also engaged at regional level with the European Union and Council of Europe and with the United Nations. There is a video embedded in this slide, which I don't have time to show you, but again, we'll make available, which is a video of the European Network of Young Advisors in their work last year, which took place entirely online. Usually, our young advisors would have the chance to meet in person. In fact, they'll be meeting in person next month, a couple of times a year. During COVID, that all happened online, but the video that's embedded in this slide, which I invite you to look at later, highlights the work that was done during COVID and the work that was done online. And I think it provides a really interesting model about how things can work online, but also recognizing, as other speakers said, the importance of in-person work where it's safe to do so. This is the day of general discussion at the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child in 2018, where we took 25 children from Scotland, and they led a huge amount of the work on child human rights defenders. You'll see the big, beautiful shields that they created, that use of art, that use of song, that use of culture. You'll see them wearing tartan and kilts and trews, was really powerful and really connected very strongly with the adults at the day of general discussion. We've also ensured that children and young people's voices are at the heart of our delegations. And so I made an important point about engaging with the Committee Against Torture. And so while the Committee on the Rights of the Child is very, very good at engaging with children and young people, it's important that children's voices are seen across the UN system. And so I actually put two of my young advisors, EJ and Katrina, who you'll see on these photos here, in charge of my delegation to the Committee Against Torture. It was the first time that young people directly addressed that, of their age, directly addressed that committee. And not only addressed it, I made sure that they were leading my delegation. I thought that made a really important point. But also, we took 4 10-year-olds, so younger children from Glasgow, to the UN Human Rights Council after doing some work with the Special Rapporteur on poverty. And more recently, one of our young advisors spoke at the UN Human Rights Council Social Forum. She did that online from one of the islands in the north of Scotland. And so technology allowing that engagement as well. And you'll see here some photos of Katrina and EJ leading our delegation at the Committee Against Torture. Here are the younger children who engaged with Philip Alston, the former Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty. The top right photos, him at their school in Glasgow, and then the other photos are them at the UN following that up when Professor Alston reported to the Human Rights Council. I know we're short of time and I've used up my time, so I'll probably just stop there with a quote from one of our young people. When the convention turned 30 a few years ago, we did a piece of work across the country where we asked children and young people to describe why rights matter to them in just 7 words, so 7-word stories. And we had thousands of entries. And again, I'll share some of those with you because they're really powerful. But Caden, who was 7, I think summed it up really well when he said, rights matter, we matter, don't lose hope. Thanks a lot.